Hello, my name is Gina Palermo, and today we're going to be talking about what is applied behavioral analysis, a parental guide to ABA. In this presentation, we'll discuss what is ABA, who benefits from it, the 7 dimensions of ABA, the principles of ABA, the ABCs, some ABA interventions, a brief overview of a few of the programs for ABA, and then what happens once you chose ABA as your treatment. ABA stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis and is the scientific intervention that's driven by data-supported evidence and seeks to see the relation between socially significant behaviors and their environment. It's quoted that ABA is the process of systematically applying interventions based on principles of learning theory to improve socially significant behaviors to a meaningful degree and to demonstrate that the interventions employed are responsible for the improvement in behavior. By behavior, we are talking about things that a human does that can be observed and measured. ABA is based on the science of behavior. We do direct experimentation and application of behavioral principles on observable behavior. So this is saying that all of our interventions are done on socially significant behaviors, all the behaviors in which are seen and observed by somebody else, so that we're able to take data on it. It is a data-driven discipline, so every piece of data that we take is all based on the behavior. Once we take all that data down, we can graph it to see what the trend in the data is. It's effective. ABA is very effective, and there are over 50 years of supporting research claiming that this is an effective, scientifically proven treatment. It requires full involvement and consistency. In other words, everybody needs to be involved and on the same page. The therapist, the parents, the family, the schools, the teachers. By doing this, we can promote for generalization and maintenance. Who can benefit from ABA? Anybody can benefit from it. Children, adults, even geriatric patients, people with disabilities, people without disabilities. Each treatment plan is individualized for each client. Even corporate businesses use ABA. They'll use a behavior analyst to look at the employment systems, the employment benefit systems, to increase employee turnover rates. So anybody that has a socially significant behavior that needs to be improved can benefit from having a behavioral therapy. Some areas that ABA can cause an increase in and improvement in is communication, social relationships, play, self-care, school, and employment, just to name a few. There are 7 dimensions of ABA. These dimensions, they really define what ABA is. All of these need to be in consideration whenever something is implemented for a treatment. We always go back to these 7 dimensions: applied, behavior, analytic, technological, conceptually systematic, effective, and generality. Applied is meaning research is conducted similar to basic research, but for a different reason. Basic research is when you're in a lab, you're probably using lab animals. So in applied behavioral analysis, we are doing experimentation on people in the natural environment, in a clinical setting, in a home setting, and we are improving socially significant behaviors. We're not getting a pigeon to peck on a tab. We are getting a person to stop engaging in self-injurious behaviors and ask for attention appropriately. Behavior, we are always need to remember that and ask ourselves whose behavior is being changed. Changes in the behavior need to be socially significant behaviors. We're not going to change behavior for something that is not socially significant. An example of this would be a child with severe injurious behavior wanting to their parents to, instead of saying, the trash can, they want us to call it the garbage. That's not a socially significant behavior at this time. Analytic. This aspect demonstrates replication with experimental control. So how we demonstrate experimental control would we start off with baseline, taking data on the behavior without any intervention in place, implement an intervention, take data on that, and then remove the intervention and take data again. When we remove the intervention, it goes back to baseline. So we should be able to see the same levels of behavior in both baselines. If we do, it shows a functional relation, and we have experimental control by doing the replication. Technological. All of the details for the treatment, for the intervention, is very clearly written so that anybody is able to continue with the intervention. Conceptually systematic. Being able to relate everything back to the identifiable principles of ABA. It's not just a bag of tricks. We have our changes in behavior are very specific to what our independent variable was, what our intervention was. It's clear that our intervention turned this behavior on and off like a light switch. Effective. We must have a practical importance and social significance for our intervention. Generality. Their intervention transfers to other settings. We don't want a treatment to be put in place that a child only engages in at home. We want that treatment to generalize to other settings, not just at home, but at school, in the clinic, in the grocery store. There are 6 basic principles of ABA: motivation, reinforcement, punishment, antecedents, behavior, and consequences. So for motivation, you're not going to be able to get a child to engage in something unless they're motivated to do so. A great example of this is practicing for demanding or requesting for an item. If a child has no interest in requesting for a cookie, they're not going to request for the cookie. If I'm holding a cookie in front of their face right after lunch when they're not hungry, they're not going to have any motivation for them to verbally admit the words cookie to access it. If you did this first thing in the morning when they hadn't had any breakfast, they're probably going to be a lot more motivated to get access to that cookie. Therefore, they would say cookie. Reinforcement is doing something to cause the behavior to increase in the future, whereas punishment, you're doing something to cause the behavior to decrease. A common misconception is that ABA does punishment procedures and it results in harm to the clients. It's associated with electric shock, which that is a form of punishment, but it's not, we're not trying to harm the child. It's put in for a good reason. Antecedents. It's what happens immediately before the behavior. The behavior is the action that we're looking at, whether it's self-interest behavior, whether it is raising your hand, if it's blinking, if it's biting. Those are all behaviors, things that are observable and measurable. Consequences. This is what happens immediately after the behavior occurs. The ABCs of applied behavioral analysis are very important. This stands for the antecedent, behavior, and consequence. Like I stated previously, the antecedent is what happens immediately before the behavior. So an example here would be, I give you a task to do. The behavior would be you completing the task. It's the thing that's observed and seen and can be measured. I can observe you completing the task. The consequence is what happens as a result of the behavior. You complete the task, I reward you with a toy. As it's mapped out below, the antecedent would be the demand, the behavior is completing the task, and the consequence is a reward, like a toy. For the second example, sister has brother's toy. The behavior is that the brother hits the sister. The consequence is the sister gives the toy to her brother. So hitting the sister got the brother exactly what he wanted. His behavior was reinforced because the sister gave him the toy. Therefore, brother will hit his sister more often to get what he wants. Alright, here we have a few ABA interventions. Two big important ones are reinforcement and punishment. So again, reinforcement is when something's added or removed contingent upon a behavior that's going to result in an increase of that behavior in the future. There's positive and negative reinforcement. For punishment, it's when something is added or removed to the environment contingent upon a behavior, which is going to result in a decrease in that behavior in the future. For punishment, there's positive and negative. Positive reinforcement. This is when something is added to the environment contingent upon a behavior, which results in an increase of that behavior in the future. The example here is having a child clean the dishes. As it's mapped out here, Mom says, "Sally, clean the dishes." The behavior, Sally is physically cleaning the dishes. As a consequence, Mom gives Sally a snack. So here, Sally's behavior of cleaning the dishes was reinforced by receiving a snack. Sally will be more likely to do the dishes in the future. In ABA therapy, this positive reinforcement can be seen very often. It's when a therapist presents a demand to a child, the child complies, and as a result, the behavior the child engaged in is rewarded with a preferred toy or tickles or physical attention. I tell you to clap, you clap, I give you tickles. You're going to clap more often when I tell you to because you want access to the physical attention that I'm providing you. Negative reinforcement. This is when something is removed from the environment or terminated, contingent upon a behavior occurring, which is going to result in the behavior occurring more often in the future. An example of this is putting on sunglasses when you go outside. You walk outside and you squint because of the sun. You put on your sunglasses, that's the behavior, and therefore the bright sun is removed from your eyes. You're going to be more likely to put on your sunglasses when you go outside so that you don't have the bright sun in your eyes. So you're cold in your house, you put on a blanket, now you're not cold. Your behavior of putting on your blanket was negatively reinforced because the coldness was removed. You're going to be more likely to use a blanket when you're cold. A classic ABA example that can be seen often in a therapy setting would be when you present a client with a task that they find hard, like handwriting. The client can point to a break pack. As soon as they point to that break pack, I remove the demand. I take away the handwriting. The demand was removed, which is why it's negative. The behavior of pointing to the break pack is going to increase in the future. That's why this is negative reinforcement. Alright, now we're moving on to punishment. Positive punishment is when a stimulus is added to the environment contingent upon a behavior occurring, which is going to cause the behavior to decrease in the future. A classic example of this is burping. When you want to put burping, you're going to implement a punishment for burping. So every time Billy, for example, burps, I squirt lemon juice in his mouth. This causes his burping to decrease. So something is added to the environment, the lemon juice, to cause the behavior, burping, to decrease. There are several different types of punishment. To name a few, we have response blocking, reprimands, overcorrection, and contingent exercise. An example of overcorrection is seen here with Jane drawing on the walls. Jane colored on the wall. Now Jane has to clean that wall plus 3 other walls in the room. Therefore, Jane does not color on the wall anymore. She had to clean up her first mess, and on top of that, clean 3 other walls, even though she didn't color on them, to get the point across that she should not be coloring on walls. Something is added to the environment, cleaning 4 walls, to decrease her behavior of coloring on the walls in the future. Negative punishment. Similar to positive punishment, the behavior is decreasing, but now we're going to remove a stimulus from the environment contingent on the behavior. So a great example of this is timeout. Sally hits Jane. Sally is removed from the playroom. Sally no longer hits Jane. So this is saying that because Jane is removed from the environment, when she's put back in the fun environment, she's no longer going to engage in those behaviors because she doesn't want to leave again. Another classic example that a lot of us have encountered is speeding. John is speeding. John is pulled over, receives a speeding ticket, therefore money is leaving his bank account, money is being removed, so now John does not speed anymore. Since money is being lost from his bank account, his behavior of speeding is going to decrease. Extinction, this is a very important intervention that we use. It's no longer providing reinforcement to a behavior that has been previously reinforced. This is not the same thing as ignoring the child. You are still paying full attention to the child, but you're no longer reinforcing the behaviors that you want to put on extinction. So whenever we put behaviors on extinction, it's very common to have an extinction burst. This is when they will engage in a various number of other behaviors to try to access your attention or to access that toy that you've taken away from them. This does not mean that the intervention is not working. It is very normal for this to occur. So keep on sticking with the intervention and you will see results. After the behavior has dropped to low levels, it is also very common to see a spontaneous recovery where randomly the behavior will reoccur and it will shoot up. As long as you do not provide reinforcement for that behavior, it will continue to be extinguished. When an extinction procedure is put in place, it's usually paired with an intervention that elicits a more appropriate response, one that takes less effort than engaging in the target behavior. A great example of this is hitting. If I engaged in hitting my mom to get attention, my mom puts hitting on extinction, but now I don't have any other way to access her attention. So by implementing a PEC card that says talk to me, now I can point to this talk to me card instead of hitting my mom, and I can still access her attention. The hopes is pointing to this talk to me card is easier for me to do than it is to hit her. There are a ton of different ABA programs that can be implemented. Again, we're improving socially significant behaviors, so all these programs must somehow improve socially significant behaviors. These can include lots of different programs, either for like adult life, like independent skills, or educational programs if they're in a full-time behavioral clinic. So we can be working on things like reading, academics, social skills, communication, gross and fine motor skills, eating and food presentation and mealtime behaviors, toileting, dressing, personal self-care, domestic chores and routines, time and punctuality, money and value, home and community orientation and interaction skills, personal relationship development, and vocational skills. These are just a few, but as you can see, there are a variety of different skills that can be taught, and they're not generalized to somebody with a disorder. You can teach vocational skills to an adult that's trying to get a job. So I here have a few programs that are listed and what kind of targets would fall under those. For communication, you're working on manding, which is requesting for an item. You can do intensive manding sessions where you are practicing having, your 5-year-old ask you for toys by actually saying a word. Train, ball, car. As soon as they say those words, you give them the toy that they just handed for. Functional communication training is like what I talked about for the extinction intervention. You're providing a PEC saying talk to me instead of hitting or engaging in those aggressive behaviors. It's a way to appropriately mand for something. Social skills. Here we have parallel play, approaching a peer, tolerating a peer approaching you, peer imitation, turn taking, peer eye contact. Visual perception. These are things that you need to scan an array or follow an object like in visual tracking, matching identical items, sorting by color and shape, matching non-identical items, arts and crafts, imitating others. So you're going to be looking at your peers that are doing the task appropriately and look for them for assistance as opposed to waiting to be prompt dependent from an adult. Tanagram and block designs, sorting by class, receptive association matching. Some motor imitation programs, we got gross and fine motor imitation with objects, spontaneous imitation, and oral imitation. For reading and math, under reading we have receptive ID of letters, tacting letters, phonemic awareness, interverbal fill-ins. These are things like, for phonemes, C says k, then k would be the response. Matching word to picture and picture to word, tacting sight words, so reading words like ball, cat, sat. Matching letters. For math, we have receptive ID of numbers, tacting numbers, rote counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That would be rote counting to 10. Counting objects, matching numbers. So once you've selected ABA for treatment, there are some things that are going to occur before the actual therapy and treatment begin. The first thing that gets done is an assessment. We need to specify the needs and abilities that can be determined through intensive assessment so we can figure out where to begin therapy at. We need to determine what the function of the behavior is. So we'll do a functional assessment of behavior or a functional analysis. So we're going to be looking at if the behavior is escape, maintained, demand, tangible, attention, or automatic. Why does a child engage in these behaviors? So we can implement the correct intervention. And lastly, we do preference assessments. In order to get a child to work well with you, you need to be able to reinforce their behavior. So by doing preference assessment, we can figure out different toys that they really like to play with that we can reward them for the behaviors that we're looking for. Here are some sources that you can look at for more information, and that concludes our presentation on applied behavioral analysis.